as we draw closer to the Castle Nathria expansion, I definitely wanted to highlight a couple of legendaries specifically that I think will have a huge impact on the meta overall. Now, these aren't personally my favorites. I do actually like some of the other legendaries more, but I think that these ones will have a very big impact in the decks that use them and the meta as a whole. Now, before we jump into the 3 cards that I have for you, I actually want to do just a couple of kind of bonus cards or cards that I feel like should be mentioned, but aren't really in my top 3. And here are the 2 that I want to talk about. The first one, we've already been playing with in the game. We've already had it. It is Prince Renithal, creating those 40-card decks, those XL decks. And I definitely wanted to bring this up because this has had a massive impact in the meta. And there are definitely decks that are capitalizing on this card, using it to its fullest. And I'm not quite sure if this card will see less play over time or actually more as we get more and more sets throughout the year. This card really probably will stick around for quite a while. So honorable mention to Prince Renithal here. And it almost feels like a cheat to use him as one of the 3 because we've already had it in game before the actual expansion. So that's why he's an honorable mention. And the second one that I'm going to claim as an honorable mention is actually Kael'Thas. Okay, hear me out. I have seen a lot of people love this card. Kael'Thas Sin Strider impacts the mana cost of the 3rd minion you play. One of the reasons this is also impactful is that Kael'Thas considers himself as one of the minions that you play for the turn. So it's going to be fairly easy for some decks to leverage this card and get out a cheap minion. I'm not sure how many decks this will be in, and it might make enough of an impact in the overall meta that even if it's played in 1 or maybe 2 decks, that it could, again, create enough of an impact that this could be considered a meta-changing card. And I think that there will be a deck that really uses this to its fullest, but I don't think it is full meta-wide game-breaking, so it's not one of my top 3. All right, now let's get into the actual top 3. All right, coming in at number 3, I have Leotard the Mad Duke. Now, this card is a neutral, so you can play it in multiple decks if you want to, but there's a couple reasons why I think that this is actually a very impactful legendary, and I think it's going to see some play. It's a decent mana cost. 4 mana means that it can fit in kind of a variety of decks. It can be played in some lower curve decks, although the body for the 4 mana isn't always great, but I think this can have a huge impact just because of the effect. The 4 mana, I think, is a pretty great cost for something like this effect. It feels like you have to pay for it, but it doesn't feel very detrimental in terms of it's not something like 8, 9, or 10 mana to get this effect. And where this is really going to hit, because it is a discover, you'll only get 3 choices out of your opponent's hand and your hand. So if there's more cards than that, it's kind of a guessing game. You might not hit a card that maybe your opponent has in the hand that you would like to have seen and chosen. But this still is going to have a huge impact. And I think where this will have the most impact is in games where the opponent gets into top deck situations, or is only going to be having a few cards at one time. Maybe decks that kind of want to unload their hand quite a bit, or later in the game, as things progress, maybe there is a deck that has been able to play things out, but then you get to this point where there's only a few cards in hand, and you're able to pick off a combo piece, an important minion, or a card such as the Quest Reward. Now, a lot of decks, especially if you get later in the game, quest rewards, probably going to get played before you would have a chance to play this. But I still think this is going to create a lot of scenarios where people might have to play their cards maybe before they even want to because of this, especially in tournaments. Now, the number 2 legendary that I think is going to have a huge impact and be important in this meta is actually the Druid legendary, Topior the Shrubagazor. What a mouthful of a name. This card can do an absolute, just massive amount of work. So you're looking at the Druid being able to play out the 7-mana minion, be able to play some nature spells. There's quite a few, even within the Castle Nathria expansion, there's quite a few cheaper nature spells that are decent on their own. So it'd be pretty easy to pair those together. But the rush impact of these whelps that come out from the nature spells, the fact that they have rush and get to impact the board immediately is huge. And there's no limit to it. The only really limiting factor is the amount of nature spells and the amount of board space. But because the Druid can rush those minions in and get them killed off potentially, allows more board space. And a lot of the nature spells can discover or create more cards, more spells. So I think this is going to be a very impactful card. And it might even warp the meta a little bit to create scenarios where decks want to play some sort of silence or removal, or even have extra silence and removal, just to make sure that they can actually answer this when it comes out. Because if this goes unchecked, it's going to create a lot of havoc. The number 1 card that I think will actually have a huge impact in this meta is actually another neutral legendary, and that is Sire Danathrius himself. It costs 10. Yes, it looks expensive, but I think this card is way better than anybody initially thought. It puts out a ton of damage if you can build up that effect. It's endless, so you just keep it going. And there are so many ways to use it. It can go in a token style deck. It can go in a deck where you're using things like the Shrubagazor that we just talked about. There's a lot of potential for this card itself. And I think even getting a smaller amount of value off of this, let's even say 5 or 6, maybe to 10, because actually that feels like a smaller value that you would get from Sire Danathrius that you would want to play it with. During the theory crafting, there were tons of big 20, 30, or plus burst damage provided by Sire Danathrius. But I think in a lot of cases, even just playing this for somewhere between the 5 to 10 will probably be good enough. And the fact that the body itself is big and has to be dealt with, and also has lifesteal, that even if the damage from the effect isn't enough to end the game or creates enough of a clear, then there's still a 10/10 lifesteal minion on the board that has to be dealt with as well. I think for quite a few decks, that will just end up shutting down a lot of what the decks want to do. Well, thank you for checking out this video. What do you think? Do you have some other legendaries that you think are going to be meta breaking or absolutely change the meta? Let me know in the comments below. And whether you are new or returning, if you have not subscribed yet, I greatly would appreciate that. We're closing in on 700 subscribers. Thank you so much, everyone. And we're really pushing to get that 1,000, the big special 1,000 on YouTube. And once we get to that point, I'm definitely going to be doing some giveaways and celebration for that because of working towards that monetization on YouTube. And really, that's only the first step, because I have so many different things planned and things that I would love to do and provide for all of you. So thank you again if you have checked this out. And whether you're new or returning, if you haven't, would greatly appreciate that subscribe. Thank you so much, and good luck in the Castle Nathria expansion.